15 WWE wrestlers who died in the ring. Worldwide entertainment wrestlers. Wrestling generally is considered by many to be a scripted affair. Most wrestlers know and have predicted the future outcome of their work because they put in a lot of efforts to make sure their bodies fit into the type of work they are doing. Wrestling is just a way of bearing risk because a wrestler knows exactly how difficult it is, and of course they know the risk in the chemicals they take to keep their bodies in good shape and able to resist. Every possible outcome in wrestling has been streamlined. Right there in the ring, many things happen and they always seemingly look easy to the viewers and the fans, but to the wrestlers it may have a lot of physical and internal effects. Many people who are good critics of these wrestling superstars are always those who get to have the fear of God in them, if at all they enter the ring just for some few minutes. What we are trying to say here is that wrestlers do not only put in efforts in order to keep the body in shape, they go as far as putting in those efforts in order to entertain fans instead. They do not only end at that. They make sure that even inside the ring, they endure a lot just to make sure that their fans are being entertained, including escaping deaths. There are certain moments when all these efforts are being tampered with. This happens in the case when their bodies refuse to respond to the changes in the ring and can no longer hold on to them. Their bodies as such tend to give up right in the ring. Most often wrestlers who died in the ring are as a result of cardiovascular issues, and studies have also shown that wrestlers die faster than their other sports counterparts just for this reason. Trending stories about the wrestlers who died in the ring are not really popular because of their controversial nature. If you're new here to our channel, don't forget to subscribe and please give this video a big thumbs up because today we will be seeing 15 WWE wrestlers who died in the ring and were spoken about by the news and media outlets. Number 1. Iron Mike DiBiase. He was the adoptive father of the $1 Million Man in 1950. Before he made his professional wrestling debut, he had been working as an amateur for many years. He won the AWA Midwest Heavyweight Championship 3 times during his career. DiBiase won titles in various territories. On the 2nd of July 1969, during a match against Man Mountain Mike, he encountered his worst. While in the ring, he suffered a heart attack. An all-time great and a one-time WWE Hall of Fame Harley was watching and immediately figured out what was wrong with DiBiase and the reason behind his collapse. Several experts attended to him there and all proved unsuccessful. DiBiase was then rushed to the hospital after everything failed, and unfortunately that was basically the end of it all. He was later announced took over him, and I bet it would have been very good if he was actually alive to see the success of his family and his generation in the career he so loved. Number 2. Malcolm Kirk. Kirk is the man that was nicknamed King Kong Kirk just because of his weight. He is the wrestler of the 70s and the 80s, and at that time he weighed about 350 pounds. It is said that Kirk died from a heart problem and his death occurred in the ring. On the 24th of August 1987, precisely on his 51st birthday, he had a match in Norfolk, and the match was against Big Daddy, another gigantic wrestler of all time. In the process, he fell to Big Daddy's finishing skill. He remained on the mat for too long and people started wondering why he was still there. Things started turning blue for him simply because of lack of oxygen. He was then immediately rushed to the hospital and later his death was announced. Rumors went around that King Kong had been suffering from heart problems and it might have been the cause of his death, not even the finishing skill. He had previously suffered some attacks. Number 3. Oro. Oro is not his original name. His real name is Jesus Javier Hernandez Silva, and he went with the nickname Oro for his games. He was a second-generation lucha star. He started his career in 1990, but it did not take him a long time. He was snatched by death only during his 3rd year right in the process. He died in 1993. He was part of a tag team match on the 26th of October 1993 where he had to take a bomb to his head. Their initial plan was to make him look as if he had broken his neck. That actually was the cause of his death because immediately after the bomb, he collapsed and before the ambulance took him, he was already gone. His family asked for the autopsy of his death, which was not performed, and as such, there was speculation that he died from an aneurysm. Oro was actually that wrestler who was so talented in being a superstar, and as such, his death terrified a lot of people. Number 4. Plum Mariko. She was a Japanese wrestler and she is considered the first Japanese pro wrestler to die in the ring. She had actually suffered multiple brain traumas during her career. Her injuries were never really taken seriously. She made her fighting debut in 1986 and trust me, she was a favorite to most Japanese. On the 15th of August 1997, she was involved in a tag team match with Command Bolshoi against Mayumi Ozaki and Reiko Amano. In the process of the game, she had another trauma and that was basically her last. She went unconscious when Ozaki hit a Liga bomb to pin her for the win. After that act, she remained on the mat without waking, and that was it all. She was then first Japanese wrestler to ever die from injuries gotten from a match. Her father never wanted her post-mortem to be performed, but people say her pre-existing head injuries and brain swelling is actually the cause of her death. Number 5. Larry Cameron. He was a man who was a sojourner across many sports before he ended his journey. His death came during the time he had a match against Tony St. Clair in Germany. Not many people will remember Larry Cameron. He went with the nickname Butcher or Lethal Larry. He was initially a footballer, and he was the one who attempted to make a head start in the Canadian Football League. After a while, he left football and went in for the Hard Dungeon, and after that he competed in a series of North American pro wrestling organizations. On the 13th of December 1993, the match between him and Tony in Germany made him suffer a heart attack, and it was the end of his life. It was the referee who stopped the match and tried to resuscitate him, but all efforts rendered were useless. Number 6. Gary Albright. Albright was a colossal man that weighed close to 350 pounds during his wrestling days. He was trained by very good and prominent wrestling masters like Lou Thesz and Billy Robinson. He was a man of success, as many people said. He had previously fought in Japan and North America. On the 7th of January 2000, he got hit by Lucifer Grimm with an ace cutter, and that made him collapse. It was the same Grimm who recognized that Albright's collapse was not ordinary, so he simply rolled him on himself in order to end the match. Many other wrestlers rushed to the ring to help revive him, but all their efforts proved abortive. It was said that he had an enlarged heart, and that was the reason he suffered a heart attack. They also said that he had undiagnosed diabetes and blocked arteries. He's actually one of those few who gave up on life in the early 20s. Too bad for him. Number 7. Luther Lindsay. Luther was a trailblazer in the 1950s and the 1960s. He was the very first African-American wrestler to fight against white wrestlers in the South, so he was the one who broke the racial barriers. He really appears like a total stranger to many, but he was a record breaker. He defeated Stu Hart in the Hart Dungeon and therefore accomplished a legendary feat. In February 1972, he got into a match in Charlotte where he pinned his opponent to a mat. After the referee counted 3 times, he did not get up. Instead of him getting up to continue the fight, he was lying right there without movement. He was then removed from on top of his opponent and rushed to the dressing room. While in the dressing room, it was noticed that he died right before they got him. His death drew sympathy from the audience, and the cause of his death was nothing else but a heart attack. Number 8. Janet Wolf. Not many women lost their lives in the ring, but Janet's case was different. She was one of the first few to lose their lives in the process and right there in the ring. Janet was just 18 years old when the famous wrestler Mildred Burke, who was already a household name in the wrestling industry in the 1950s, took her in as a successor. Mildred actually started looking for a replacement in 1952 when she came across Janet Boyer. She then started working with Mildred under the name Janet Wolfer. She was doing well in the game, but not for a long time. Janet got involved in a tag team match which included the WWE star Mae Young in Liverpool. That was where she met her doom. It is said that she had previously complained of a headache earlier that day. After she tagged out in the match, she stood on the apron looking so frustrated, and before the audience knew it, she suddenly collapsed, and that was it. She never woke up after the collapse, and it was later that she was announced dead. Her death came just after 6 months into this career. She suffered from a brain hemorrhage, and that was the end of her small life on earth. Number 9. Pero Aguayo Jr. His death is actually one of the most recent accounts recorded of wrestlers who died in the ring. His death was actually one of the heart-touching and modern pro wrestling tragedies. In Lucha Libre Promotions and the AAA and CMLL, he made for himself a household name and was fighting as a skilled wrestler. On the 25th of March 2015, he got into a tag team match with Manic against Rey Mysterio Jr. and Extreme Tiger. The match was a routine match and Mysterio performed a dropkick on Pero. This act sent his neck into ropes so Mysterio could perform his legendary move on him. Things went sour when Pero did not respond to all the moves. His body was actually limp. Many attempts were carried on to revive him, but none seemed to work. He was later announced dead, and they said he had suffered multiple vertebral injuries that caused him to have cervical stroke. This ended his story of life and his story in the wrestling industry. Number 10. Owen Hart. His death was one of the most heart-wrenching and tragic events in the history of WWE. Right in the industry, he was one of the most loved amongst all. The WWE legend Bret Hart was a brother to him and was a graduate from the Hart Dungeon owned by their dad. In the industry, he made himself a household name and he fought many household names as well. He also made himself fans' favorite. He had a rivalry with his brother Brett and it was really iconic. His work with The Rock was praised by the whole fan base. His recent stunt ended in tears. In 1999, he was to be lowered onto the ring by a harness over the Edge pay-per-view event and he was to be dressed as the Blazer. He was expected to fall flat on his face. Unfortunately, the cable holding him snapped halfway and released him too suddenly. He fell down almost 80 feet and crashed into the ring. He was not pronounced dead immediately. He was rushed to the hospital and it is then that the doctor said he died upon impact. Due to the fall, he had internal injuries that caused him to bleed to death. Number 11. Dan Spider Quirk. Spider, as many called him, is one of WWE's wrestlers who died in the ring. Daniel Michael Quirk is his real name and many commonly called him Spider. He actually made his professional debut before he turned 20 years in 2002. By the age of 22, Quirk was ready to establish himself in the wrestling industry as a professional wrestler. His match against Heelite Kid as an Ultimate Championship wrestling event on the 28th of March 2005 was actually his last. In the course of the fight, Quirk's opponent missed a step and Quirk wanted to cover up for his opponent's mistake, so he tried to improvise on his fly. It all ended him falling on his head on the floor and unfortunately for him, there was no mat on the floor outside the ring. He landed on his head outside the ring and on the floor without a mat. The referee stopped the match without hesitating and he was immediately taken by an ambulance. He was attended to by many ways and many people, but all proved to be effortless. He was gone after all. Number 12. Brian Ong. Brian's own case was actually an interesting one amongst all deaths recorded about wrestlers. He actually died not in a real fight but in a training session with Dalip Singh. Even before the time of the incident, Brian was already dealing with a lot of injuries and at that time, he had an APW promotion that served as motivation to him to continue performing. In the training session, he executed a flapjack that required the executioner as well as the victim. He did not do as required of him, so he missed a step and fell hard on the mat and this caused him a lot of injuries. He did not die immediately though, he died a few days later after the day. The promotion he was working on had to pay his family 1.3 million for all the damages caused because they were found responsible for all the carelessness and mismanagement of his health. If a wrestler dies because of negligence by the company, they are expected to compensate for all the damage. Number 13. Mitsuhara Tiger Mask Misawa. He was a Japanese pro wrestler and he wrestled against very good and famous American wrestlers of all time. He is a character who always wears his tiger mask and he rose to fame in the 1980s as the Tiger Mask. This man was really that famous that when he unmasked himself in the 1990s, his fame and fan base only increased. At 46 years old, he was named the Professional Wrestler of the Year 3 times already. He founded and owned the Pro Wrestling NOAH Federation and even at that, he still competed in the ring. On the 13th of June 2009, he was involved in a tag team with Go Shiozaki and that is where the tragedy happened. In the process, Saito gave Misawa a back suplex and it is a move that most wrestlers are already so familiar with. The outcome of that game was just to prove that in wrestling, nothing is actually routine. Anything can happen at any time. He never moved again after the impact of the move on him. He was then declared dead after in the hospital. Many people say that the cause of his death is his heart failure. He was basically lifeless before being taken to the hospital. Number 14. Wayne Richard Delicious Van Dyke. Van Dyke aka Richard Delicious was an independent wrestler and he was working on the promotions that came from Florida. At the age of 29, he was involved in a tag team match arranged by Ronin Pro Wrestling and it was there that he encountered a series of heart attacks. Before going in for the game, he told his tag team member that he was not really feeling fine just after he suffered the first attack and just after tagging himself out of it. People tried to help him out just there. Things instead left from better to worst. CPR was given to him just at the spot and this left him with at least one broken rib and a punctured lung. On his way to the hospital, he suffered the second attack and while in the hospital, he suffered the third attack. At that point, the hospital staff had to put him in a state of coma. The injuries he got from the game had a very great impact on him anyways. He was later declared dead on Facebook by his family members. Number 15. Matt Riot Lowry. Just like all the others stated above, Matt died in the ring. He was not one that got much of an audience. It is said that Lowry was participating in a routine training session when a bomb interrupted. It was on the 25th of September 2009 when the wrestler was training at the ECW arena. He was not working alone but with some other wrestlers who were preparing for the CZW promotion. After working out, he became very dizzy, looking so stressed, and suddenly he passed out. He had suffered a brain problem. He was rushed to the hospital and declared dead after some hours. He was just 21 years old when all this happened, so he was still trying to give the wrestling business a name. The question that is on your mind right now is probably why most wrestlers die only from heart attacks. Over many years, the report is only about attacks and many really wonder. One thing we need to understand is the fact that wrestling is a very consuming sport and requires extreme fitness. If not so, you'll probably get tired and at the end have breathing issues which will eventually lead to an attack. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more amazing content.